Welcome to Maeystown. I'm David Braswell, resident and owner of the bed and breakfast here in the village, and I'm here to tell you just a little bit about our historic town, which is just one of a dozen historic villages out of 2,500 cities, villages, and towns in the state of Illinois. I'm standing in front of the Maeystown Preservation Society's mill. It's called in the corner over there to the right. It says Sidinger's Mill, built 1859, and we know this was used as a mill between 1859 and 1869, but for only 10 years when a fire destroyed much of the building. It sat abandoned for almost a decade, and then in the 1880s it was rebuilt, intending to put a steam engine in here, but by that time the bigger cities up the road, up in towns we today call Waterloo, Columbia, already had mills, and so the usefulness of a mill here in a small village was not seen as something advantageous at that point. The town grew and developed though, and it's told here, this little plaque here to my left. This tells about how Jacob Mays arrived here in the 1840s. In 1852, he, along with friends, founded the town that we now know as Maeystown. Originally it was called Maysville. Jacob Mays and his family were from Germany, and a large number of the families that settled in this town were originally from southwestern Germany, from a town of Bellheim. Jacob Mays himself was from Ogersheim, which is on the Rhine River. He came here, and when he built his log cabin, he felt that this was an ideal spot because it was where two rivers came together. These two rivers are actually creeks. Others came here primarily to this village because it's located at the end of a valley that extends to the Mississippi River plain. In the bluffs between St. Louis and Chester, there are not many places where there are little valleys like this. This was a rare one, a rare site for a town location. And he thought, since there was constant water here, this would be a good place for a mill. And this is where he opened his first mill here, actually further up the street, and then this was built in 1859. Maeystown grew, and to the point that by 1880, 300 people lived here in the village. That was the largest number of people. Since that time, the numbers have declined. I think today our actual population is about half that, 150. And so this was almost an abandoned city 40 years ago. And there's a certain beauty in a building falling down. You can imagine what it's like if it's fixed up, and how sad it would be if it's torn down. So artists came to paint Maeystown in the late 70s and early 80s, and they depicted a town in disrepair and falling apart, and just one business in town, that's the tavern across the street. No other businesses were basically here in the town anymore. After they left, and the artists then left in the late 80s, people like myself and about 10 other couples found that Maeystown had potential as a town for tourism, and a town that could be, it was small enough, and that's the important thing, it was small enough that it could be restored by individuals, not one person doing the entire town, but individuals. And several people came and started in one building, and then I saw what was going on, and I found out that our building was going to be up for auction, so we bought that at an auction. Then gradually more and more people came and bought buildings, and so we felt it was important to keep the town together and preserve it, and we were glad we did, because now Maeystown, along with Elsa and Bishop Hill and 8 or 9 other towns in Illinois, are just part of a group of 12 or less towns that are on the National Register of Historic Places. And part of our effort to save the town has included the bridge. The stone arched bridge in Maeystown has been the insignia for our little village here for over almost 150 years. And it was built in 1881. It was completed in the same year by artisans who lived here in the village. Stonemasons especially were a part of the makeup of the town. And it's been a very important part, and so important that in 1970, when it was threatened to be torn down, the local ladies, not men, but the local ladies marched on City Hall. They marched to the county seat in Waterloo and demanded that the one-lane stone bridge be saved and not be torn down. Gloria, who spearheaded the event, she was the granddaughter of the founder of Maeystown, and she and her friends single-handedly fought off City Hall, if you will, and made it possible for that bridge to stay. In the 1970s, the farmers' equipment was becoming larger and they needed more space. And they said, well, you find another way to do it. And the ladies prevailed and the bridge was not torn down. And since then, one of the younger members of our community, she took it upon herself to set up a GoFundMe account. She's had various fundraisers, and in a period of over a year, we have raised more than $20,000 to restore the bridge. Now, it's going to cost more, but the county has offered to help us out and to work with us in any way they can. So we're well on our way to achieving our goal of restoring the Stone Arch Bridge. And we're looking forward to that completion this spring. Our little street here in front of us is the route through which traffic used to go constantly, large amount of traffic, but 15, 20 years ago, a group of us got together and we asked for a bypass. Now that was a big request for a little village, but sure enough, within 7 years, we were able to obtain a bypass around the village. So now, in order to access Maeystown today, you have to get off the highway. Most of the buildings, about 60 of them in the town, are ancient buildings. If we look across the street, there's one with a stone foundation up there on the hillside. And that stone foundation house is very unusual because the white siding is covered up what they call, it's a brick nogging or brick construction made just sun-dried bricks underneath that siding. And that's how the house was built, and then probably covered with maybe wood or plaster. We're not really sure. But in the restoration process, that inner fill was still left. The houses to the left of us, right below the house, the one French style house, by the way, that we call it, that's the only French style house we call it, we name in town because it has that front porch on it. But this house to our left, with the beige brown stucco, and the house here to our right are both rock houses. So if you could imagine this corner 150 years ago, you had 4 rock houses here. The house to our left that you can see over here, which was built in 1854, our rock building here, which was built in 1859, and I'm not sure the dates of these 2 buildings, but all 4 of them were comprised the rock construction center, if you will, of Maeystown back in the 1850s. We're walking down the street here, and over on the right is my favorite place to eat on Saturday afternoon between 11:30 and 2:30. In fact, you can almost find me there every weekend. It's called Vicky's Front Porch, a tea garden. Vicky was a former bed and breakfast owner, and she loves to cook. Fixes a fresh, home-cooked meal every Saturday, and brings others to the community, as well as those of us who live here in town and want to support her and enjoy a fresh cooked meal. Just great. Her building was actually the home of Tinner Miller. He lived on one side, and on the right side, he had his office, and where he sold stoves. And at the same time, he put the tin roofs on all the buildings. You notice on this house here, there is a tin roof, which the one that he probably put in well over 100 years ago. As you may know, anybody that, like the big buildings in downtown St. Louis that has money, they put on metal roofs because a metal roof that'll last a long time. All right, this next house is one of the buildings that's part of the Corner George Inn Bed and Breakfast Complex. This building was built in the early 1860s by the immigrants from Germany. That's what's kind of cool, is that these next 2 or 3 buildings were built by German immigrants. And these were their, probably, well, some of them lived in log cabins first, but this rock house is modeled after a type of house that you might find in Belheim, Germany, which is the village from which the immigrants came. The front part of the building has high windows. The top and back part of the building has just short 6/6 windows, indicating that in those days it was important to show your wealth by putting more expensive things to the front of the building. The beautiful porch is recreated. Actually, the posts are original. The decorative pieces, though, have all had been remade, except for the wonderful little brackets at the top, which we found and bought at the auction prior to the sale of the entire property to us some 25 years ago. This particular building here, which is part of our bed and breakfast, has 2 bed and breakfast suites over here to the right, David Mamie's suite and the loft suite, which is very interesting, on the 2nd floor. And in addition to those 2 units, it has here on the left, it has my wife Marcia's antique shop. It's called Georgia May's Antiques and Collectibles, named after the lady from whose estate we bought the property. Upstairs is an apartment, and in the back, I think the coffee business is over with for the day, but every weekend Arnie Jolfs entertains bicycle riders who come from St. Louis, who park in Columbia and ride their bike down here and then turn around each Saturday and Sunday morning. So who knows, we could have probably had several dozen bicycle riders here this morning already. But let's go inside and see what's going on with my wife. See if there are any customers inside here. Our shops and stores are only open on the weekends, generally from 10 to 4.
Trade places with that, is she eating her lunch?
This room here that we're in right now, which now is Marcia's antique shop, was originally a harness and saddle shop.
I was going to say if she wanted to
When
trade
it was
slots with you,
built,
then you
remodeled rather, in 1911, they made this into a harness and saddle shop. And it served as that purpose probably until about the 1940s. There's a business or two in here, and then after that, from 1950 to 1975, this was actually the town grocery store. The groceries here were served up by Georgia May. She is quite well known for her making sure the kids behaved, and quite well known for being able to sell just about anything. When the estate sale occurred back in the middle 90s, we found many of the items that they had sold here in the store that were not sold, that were available at the auction. Behind us, and through this door over here, I'll open the door here to my right. This is the Maeystown Coffee House, or Cafe House. And on a Saturday and a Sunday morning, you would find locals as well as bicycle riders, many of them from St. Louis, who have arrived here as their endpoint of their round trip, endpoint for the midway, let's put it that way, of their round trip ride from Columbia, Illinois to Maeystown and back to Columbia.
This was one time a hotel and a saloon, and this was the saloon part. And so the front doors were actually 3 sets. And at the bottom of the hill, you'll notice that Main Street is wider than at the top. And so the horse-drawn wagons could pull up, back up, and load the barrels right on in here. And after it was actually a hotel and a saloon, it was a general store for a while. And then when I was a little girl, because this is my hometown, it was a feed store. The shop is filled with old things and new things. My husband makes all the shaker furniture and all the shaker boxes here in Maeystown. The 2 counters were actually my relative's, Jacob May's. And his granddaughter left them to me as long as they stay in Maeystown. And the glass case at the end was also Jacob May's, and we repaired it. It has some of the original glass in it that we did repair. And so it will stay in Maeystown as well. And these were all in the store. That was Jacob May's store across the street right over here in the empty lot. And all the shelvings on the walls, you know, those are original. The lights are from the old post office in St. Louis. Marcia and David found them down on Cherokee Street. And the tubing and wire on top really do not work, but we just couldn't leave them if we had to.
Okay, we're going to step into the Corner George Inn Bed and Breakfast. which has been here since 1884. That was the year that they completed the building and opened up a hotel and saloon, as it says on the side of the building. At that time, in 1884, there were 2 hotel rooms upstairs. The owners lived downstairs, and the room that we were just in, the Maeystown General Store, was the saloon. That was where everyone in town met, where they drank. And inside of our building starts here, we have 6 guest rooms. This is our first of our 6 guest rooms. This is the Raver Room here straight ahead. The Raver Room is named after a local family. It's our smallest room, but it's very nicely appointed. My wife does all the decorating. Every room includes not only the bed and dresser and a chair, but it includes a bathroom. Every room in our bed and breakfast has its own private bath. We have 2 more rooms, 2 rooms upstairs in our Victorian ballroom. We greet our guests when they arrive here at the bed and breakfast here on the first floor. We ask them to sign in, and then we take them to their room, which could be one of the 3 rooms here in the main building, or it could be our summer kitchen guest cottage up in the back, or we have 2 suites across the street in the Georgian greenhouse. Upstairs, after climbing 18 steps, we arrive at the 2 hotel rooms. The first over here on the right is an original hotel room. A lot of people don't know it, but back in the 1800s, only men traveled. So if you stayed in a room, you stayed in a room with some other stranger. This particular room is the original hotel room. There is no furniture here from that time period. The furniture that was here is all taken away. But what you see is my great-great-grandfather's bed here in front of us. And then off to the left is one of our bathrooms. Again, a complete bathroom with a clawfoot tub and a shower. The ceilings in this room and in all the other rooms are 10 feet 4 inches in height. With a high ceiling, the hot air would rise, and then you would open these transoms, like this one right here. And they must have had a special tool to do it, not everybody was my height. You'd open the transom, open the windows behind us, and air would blow through. And imagine hot air rises, the wind blows the hot air through, and then you have a continual flow of air such that it's going to feel cooler because the hot air is continuing to rise. And it's a very unique feature of an old building, especially this one from the 1880s. This window is very special because it's the original window from 1884. It has the original lock, which works up, around, and opens. This is not a replacement window. I call it the original $1.84 window. That's what it cost for the rope that's in behind the channels here, which have weights in them, which allow the window to go up and down. This little light fixture is from another building. It's an antique, but what is interesting is that piece of glass. When we bought the building, there was only one light in the building. It was hanging from a stranded cord, and this was the glass shade that was on that, and it was hanging right above the bottom of the staircase, right above the newel post. And that's what we have here. One of the few vestiges of the long ago past. It's hanging in the bedroom. So we go down the hallway, and the doorway to the left that I always like to talk about is the doorway to nowhere, because this is the doorway that once went from the ballroom to the sitting room to the 2 hotel rooms. I mentioned that only men traveled, and then they didn't even rent a room, they rented a bed. But this would have been their sitting room, and the staircase that they came up would have been in the back and not here. This staircase that you see here was built in the early 1900s, after the building ceased being used as a hotel. Prior to that, entrance to the 2nd floor was from the staircase here in the back of the building, which is now covered over with a floor. But this staircase was built and produced following the use of the building as a hotel. It became a residence sometime after the turn of the century. And one of the interesting pieces, and that tells the story completely, is this little piece of wood over here that has a little slit in it. It tells you that at one time there was a baseboard all the way across where that little break is in the wood. It's just like on the other side where it's 45-degree angle. That wood tells you that there was a baseboard all the way across, and the staircase was an add-on, not an original. As we go around to the right, here, and this is what we call the sitting room, this was actually the staircase from the 1st floor to the 2nd floor. In fact, this was all open. As we look to the right of the doorway, there's a window This particular window has shutter hardware on it, which means that this was an L-shaped building originally. Every window, of course, had shutters on it to be closed, as we use storm windows today. And there was a staircase. As we look out the window here at this point, there was a staircase that went down on both sides. Sideways to the left went down to the street. The side stair to the right went down to the outhouse. And outside you can see probably the last house from the 1940s, which we have restored and now consider and have used actually for our plants in the summertime. It's our gardening shed. This room is the McRoberts room. It was once non-existent. Well, not quite. Part of it, where you see this door to the right, was a sleeping porch in the time of the 1900s when no one had air conditioning. It was important to sleep in a cool area. So you would move from your room to a double bed, or I think a double bunk bed type of porch. And this area where we're looking at now where the bed is, that was probably just outdoors. So this L-shaped building was made into a rectangular building sometime after the turn of the century. And this room was created because over here, as we look to the right, this was, which looks like a door, was really a window. And the clues are everywhere. The shutters are here, the rollers for the window ropes are here, and over here to my left is the original window weight, which I rigged up to show off to people like you. All right. Again, we have a full bath in this room, the McRoberts room. The full bath includes toilet, pedestal sink, and a clawfoot tub, which has a shower combination with it. Long ago, people would come up the staircase and come in here to the ballroom on a Sunday night like tonight. And on a Sunday night back in the early 1900s up till about 1917, 1918, they watched silent movies here. As we look around here past the piano and then to the windows, a sheet would be hung in front of these windows that you see here on a Sunday night when it got dark. And for a nickel, at 8 o'clock, you could come up here on a night like tonight and watch movies. To put it in perspective, Maeystown did not have electricity until about 1937. Didn't have any city water, because everyone had wells, but didn't have any city water until 1977. And didn't have a sewer until 1997. So it took almost 60 years for Maeystown to come into the modern world. A piece of furniture directly in front of us is a pump organ. It's called the poor man's piano, because this beautiful piece of furniture, which we think is one of the nicest pieces we have, is actually used in, which actually once used in a church, is a very lightweight instrument. It can be picked up, there are handles on the side, it can be taken apart, the top crown can be removed, and 2 people can actually carry it out of this room, and with some assistance, probably down the stairs. So the pump organ, which dates from the 1890s, was very common in homes and also, I'm sure, in some churches. Looking just beyond it is the piano in the distance. That piano probably weighs 2.5 times, maybe 600 pounds, the weight of this pump organ. This is a piano that we found in the home next door. My wife gives piano lessons here regularly, and it has above it the pictures of the various Georges who lived in the area. There was Corner George, there was Fat George, Laughing George, and Schmidt George. Now some of them are represented here, some are not. But these men all lived in a row here at one time. The man who lived at the end of the street, he laughed a lot, they called him Laughing George. The man who was next door, he was the blacksmith, they called him Schmidt George. The next George was a little overweight, they called him Fat George. But this George lived in the corner, so he was called Corner George. Just thus the name Corner George. Yeah. Dining room table belonged to my great-great-grandfather. He was born in 1818, came to America in 1841, and used this table probably in the 1870s, 80s, 90s, until his death in 1904 in the town of Muscuda. It was inherited by us 5 generations later and is today the focal point for our guests as they eat breakfast. The other furniture in the building includes a couch that dates to the 20s, but it's been reupholstered. This particular couch was used by a music teacher. She had naugahyde on it, but that didn't quite fit our decor, so we had it reupholstered. To the left of that is a spinning wheel. It was from my grandmother. And probably the most interesting thing of this musical instrument in the room is this Victrola here, which I can actually play. Let me take a second here and show you how this works. The Victrola dates from 1919, made in St. Louis, and somebody used it last who didn't do it right. We wind it up and take off the brake. There we go. Put it up to speed.
Sound is controlled by a single piece of wood that covers the speaker. This is 1919 technology, 100 years ago. Pushing it in gives us full volume. Pulling it out mutes the sound considerably. 1919. Unusual for that time is a speedometer, if you will. I can speed up and or slow the rate at which this record plays. As you can tell, right like that. I don't know that this comes, but on the most expensive, if even comes on recording machines today, record players.
Kitchen here at the Corner George Inn was actually made out of 2 rooms. The only place in the entire building where we actually took out a wall that wasn't original. In the process, we created a kitchen for ourselves that has served our purposes quite well for the last 29 years. The kitchen cabinets that you see in front of you are those that were made by a local farmer who in his lifetime has made 5 sets of kitchen cabinets. We used 100-year-old beautiful glass doors that came from another library case, and then he, using a type of poplar, I believe, created the cabinets. And of course you want to make sure that everything in them was in nice order, and we tried to keep that. So the rest of the cabinets that you see here were also made by our local farmers, and the piece of furniture directly ahead of us was made by my great-great-grandfather. Everybody has 8 great-great-grandfathers, and this particular one lived in Quincy, Illinois. He made this, and we know it because when we brought it down here, we took it apart, and sure enough, it said Friedrich W. Jansen, 1857. The door here to my left is one of the original doors here at the inn, and what might look like an expensive burl door is nothing but a piece of artwork. This was painted, stained, and I prefer the process of graining. But it was not just any ordinary graining created by somebody's imagination. It was taken from a pattern, because every single door in the village, every single door at the inn here has this particular pattern on it. It's not the same, and I think it was done freehand. I think they had in their hand a pattern, and then they just drew it. And so none are alike. There's so much alike, it could not have occurred in nature. The door features over here on the right a black porcelain knob, and on the back side I think there's probably a lock box here too, yes. We have white and black porcelain knobs for the most part here in the main building. Very common in the 1880s. And so it's really a piece of artwork that you're looking at here. First it's painted, then it's stained, and then they take a tool and probably did something like this. that's the best of my knowledge of what they did to create the store. These are hinges from the 1880s, very ornate hinges. In fact, this set I don't think we even restored. But when we bought the building, we took every door and off, took the hinges out, soaked them in a solution to take the paint off, and then re-primed and painted them. But these are the original 1880s hinges. These were the hinges that were popular in the 1880s. So they can be dated because of the design in them and the way that they were made. If ever I take a tour of any building, my most favorite place is the cellar. We'll head downstairs, and we're only going to see here first the upper cellar, which has in it my plants for spring and my 1950s ping pong table that we resurrected from our home in Belleville. But mind you, this is just the upper basement, and it's built though in a style that is to be marveled at. Some of those stones in the back wall easily weigh 200 or 300 pounds. This building was built into the hillside, as all the buildings in Maeystown are, built of limestone rocks that were harvested locally and put together with a type of mortar that's called a dry mortar. It wasn't the concrete that we know today. But going downstairs, we enter into the wine cellar. This was perhaps originally used as the ice house, which we're almost certain it was. And it was here that a vaulted cellar was built. So I would probably hit my head today if it were here. From this side to the other side. And if you look, follow my hand back this way, you'll see something very unusual. You can see the remains of what was perhaps a ledge right here, and on the other side, another ledge. So it's our knowledge, to our best of our knowledge, there are other cellars intact. But at one time, this was a vaulted wine cellar, which had 2 air vents, one here on the left, which worked. And then over here on the right, there's another air vent that they started, but then they realized they weren't going to go anywhere with it, so I think they stopped. But directly ahead of us is how they brought the ice down into the basement. They covered it generally with leaves or sawdust, and that hopefully kept things cold until the summer. When we came, this was filled with dirt, this high. We worked for 10 days and took out over 20 tons of dirt, and to our great amazement, well, we had done some pre-checking on it. We had taken a postal digger and found out the floor was here. But we were pretty sure there was a floor here, and our guess was confirmed in that this is the solid floor that was below it. We came here, this dirt was this high, and the sump pump was sitting right here in 1988. That's 104 years after the building was built. And we've theorized and later learned that the water table here is very high. The upper basement was simply a dirt floor, and that the water has brought the dirt from the upper basement down here into this floor over a period of half a century. But this is the original floor, and we have an idea as to when this was done because we think up until 1905, concrete as we know it didn't exist. You had a type of mortar, but it wasn't concrete like we know. And this is concrete on top of stones. These are flagstones, big, huge pieces of limestone that were laid in the floor and then covered with the concrete. So this was perhaps done later, after 20 years after the site was built. The barrels are not authentic, but they date from the 1940s. The barrels were given to us as a gift upon our arrival here in town, and they thought we might want to decorate the basement with them, and we said, indeed we will. The other thing here too is kind of cool. The original floor joists are here, dark ones on the left, and they were, when the dirt was this high, the floor was starting to sag, so they put a 2x4 from here, right here at my waist, up to support those. And of course termites started to crawl. But fortunately we got here before they got too far. But in order to support the floor, we found at a local lumber yard 24-foot long 2x12s. And there was almost the exact same size as the piece of wood that was here when we came, when the building was built in 1884. That was the find of the century for us. And then they were what we call face nailed to the old 2x12. The building here has 2x12s on the first floor, 2x10s on the second and third floor. What any builder today would call overbuilt.
Between